The positive pregnancy test was not hers. This was the first and only certain thought that broke through the fog in Amelia Hayes's mind as the air caught in her lungs. The small, white plastic stick with its 2 stark blue lines lay tossed carelessly in the glove compartment of her husband Ryan's Audi Q7. She had only opened the door to grab a bag of groceries she had left on the passenger seat. A mundane motion, an ordinary day, shattered in a fraction of a second. If anyone had ever doubted her strength, now was the time for it to be tested. Sometimes, a woman's solitary courage is exactly what the world needs most. Amelia froze, her hand still clenched on the handle in the quiet garage of the luxury condominium in Boston's Back Bay where they lived. The new car smell, a scent of leather that once gave her a sense of comfort and status, now felt suffocating. For years, she had religiously taken her birth control pills at the same time every day. There was no room for error. There was absolutely no possibility that this test belonged to her. Her hand began to tremble. It was not a subtle quiver, but a convulsion that climbed her arm, threatening to take over her entire body. She closed the car door with a soft, almost automatic click. The sound echoed in the empty garage. She leaned against the cool metal of the car's body, feeling her legs give way, unable to support her weight. The ground did not open up, the world did not collapse. The feeling was far more physical, more brutal, as if gravity had suddenly doubled, pulling her down, crushing her bones. She took a deep breath. Once, twice, a third time. Air flowed into her lungs, but it didn't seem to reach where it was needed. The metallic taste of panic flooded her mouth. Amelia was a respected physical therapist at a high-end dermatology clinic. She understood the human body, its reactions, its limits. She knew she was in shock. She had to move. She had to get out of there. With an effort that felt monumental, she straightened up. She grabbed the grocery bag that had been the cause of it all. Inside were the ingredients for a special dinner she had planned to make for Ryan. The irony was cruel. She walked toward the elevator, her steps strangely heavy on the polished concrete. Each step was a conscious decision. Left foot, right foot. Don't think, just walk. Inside the apartment, the silence was overwhelming. The spacious interior, decorated with the elegant minimalism they both cherished, now looked like an empty stage in a theater. She placed the bag on the marble kitchen island. Her hands were still shaking so violently that she finally dropped a glass jar. The sound of shattering glass on the floor was sharp, brutal. Amelia didn't move to clean it up. She just stared at the shards, scattered like a portrait of her own life. In that moment, she sat down on the living room sofa with her phone in her hand. The urge to call Ryan, to scream, to demand an explanation, was overpowering. But another part of her mind, a cold, calculating side she barely knew, held her back. What would he say? He would lie. Of course. He would say it belonged to a colleague from work, that he was giving someone a ride, that he found it in the office parking lot. He was a sales manager at a luxury car dealership. He was a salesman to his core. His life was about building credible narratives to win people over. He was good at it, too good. Amelia thought about her life. At 33, she had an established career, a reputable aesthetic medicine clinic she co-owned, and a reputation to protect. She was seen as a successful, balanced woman who had everything under control. Married to Ryan for 7 years, they were the couple everyone admired, attractive, accomplished, regulars at Boston's finest restaurants. Her family, traditional and close-knit, adored him. He was the perfect son-in-law, always smiling at the Sunday barbecues, always ready with a funny anecdote. An image of him laughing with her father at the last family gathering flashed before her eyes, the ease with which he charmed everyone, the confidence he exuded. Was it all a facade? How many more secrets were hidden behind that smile? The trembling in her hands subsided, replaced by an iciness that spread through her veins. She would not call him. She would not scream. She would not give him the chance to manipulate the situation and turn her into a jealous, desperate wife. She stood up, went to the bathroom, and splashed her face with cold water. She looked at her reflection in the mirror. Her eyes were sunken, her skin pale, but there was something else there. A hardness she didn't recognize in herself. When Ryan returned 2 hours later, she was in the kitchen, finishing dinner preparations. The broken glass had been cleaned up. The countertop gleamed. "Hi, honey," he said, walking in and placing his leather briefcase on a chair. He came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist, and kissed her neck. "Smells amazing." Amelia didn't flinch. Her body went rigid under his touch. She smelled his cologne, the mix of woody notes he always wore, but with something else, a foreign, sweet floral trace that was not hers. "Tired?" she asked, her voice surprisingly calm. Exhausted. Crazy day. We finally closed the deal on that Porsche for Mr. Mary. Remember I told you? That client was a tough nut to crack. He spoke with his usual enthusiasm, his eyes sparkling. Amelia just nodded, turning to face him. She observed him as if seeing him for the first time. His perfectly styled hair, his neatly trimmed beard, the designer shirt, wrinkled just enough to look casually elegant. He was a handsome man, charming, a true predator. That's wonderful, darling. I'm happy for you, she said, and even managed a faint smile. During dinner, she listened as he talked about his sales commission and a business trip he had to take next week. She ate in silence, each bite requiring a conscious effort. The food had no taste. The expensive red wine he loved so much went down her throat with a bitter tang. She felt his occasional glances, a hint of concern in his eyes. Everything okay, Amelia? You're quiet tonight. Just a little tired. A long day at the clinic, she lied. The lie came with a fluency that terrified her. He seemed satisfied with the answer. He kept talking, and Amelia just nodded along, her mind 1,000 miles away. She thought about the pregnancy test, the 2 blue lines, the unknown woman carrying her husband's child. Nausea rose in her throat. She had to grip her silverware tightly to keep from standing up and vomiting right there at the table. In bed that night, he reached for her. His hands roamed her body with a familiarity that now felt like a violation. Amelia turned away, blaming a headache. Again, Amelia? That's the 3rd time this week. There was irritation and impatience in his voice. She felt a wave of anger so intense she thought she might explode. But the coldness took over again. I'm sorry. This migraine is killing me. I'll take something for it. She got up and went to the bathroom, locking the door behind her. She leaned both hands on the sink, her body trembling again. She looked at the medicine cabinet. There was her blister pack of pills. With the days of the week marked, all taken on time. Mute proof of her fidelity, her care, and of his betrayal. She didn't go back to bed right away. She sat on the cold bathroom floor for nearly an hour, her thoughts racing in circles. The discovery of the pregnancy test wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. She didn't know what she would do yet, but she knew exactly what she wouldn't do. She would not be a victim. She would not cry. She would not beg. She would go back to that bed, lie down next to the man who had destroyed her trust, and pretend that nothing had happened. She would wait, because she understood that you don't ask for the truth. You hunt it down. The next morning arrived with an almost insulting normalcy. The Boston sun, often sharp and relentless, poured bright light into the apartment, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. Amelia woke up before Ryan. It was an old habit that now served as a small line of defense. His side of the bed was untouched from the moment she had taken refuge in the bathroom the night before. She had not returned. She had spent the night awake, sitting in an armchair in their walk-in closet, her only companion, the silence. Fatigue weighed on her muscles, but her mind was sharp, as alert as a cornered animal. She moved through the apartment with robotic precision. She brewed coffee, its strong aroma filling the kitchen. She dressed for work. Tailored slacks and a silk blouse were her armor for the day ahead. Every action was deliberate, a way to maintain control over the chaos that had taken root inside her. When Ryan finally appeared in the kitchen, already dressed for the office, his smile was the same as always, easy and carefree. He grabbed a mug of coffee, his eyes scanning the digital newspaper on his tablet. "Morning, honey. Sleep well?" he asked, not really expecting an answer, already focused on the stock market listings. "Yes." The lie came out dry, like a piece of glass scratching her throat. He either didn't notice or chose not to. His indifference was like a knife slowly turning in the wound. He finished his coffee, gave her a quick peck on the cheek, a cold, routine touch, and grabbed his briefcase. "See you tonight. We have a team-building thing with the sales group, so I might be a little late." Amelia just nodded, watching him leave. The door closed, and the click of the lock was like the start of a stopwatch. She was alone. The silence that followed brought no peace, only an amplification of her thoughts. The pregnancy test. The unknown woman. The child that was not hers. The words swirled in her head like a toxic litany. She needed air. She had to get out, to throw herself into the vortex of her work and, for a few hours at least, be simply Dr. Amelia Hayes, a competent professional who solved other people's problems. The day at the clinic blurred into a series of treatments, consultations, and forced smiles. She was on autopilot. Her hands performed therapies with a precision her mind barely registered. Her patients, accustomed to her warm approach, seemed not to notice the distance in her gaze. To them, Amelia was still a safe harbor. No one saw the storm raging behind the facade of calm professionalism. She returned home late in the afternoon, exhausted in a way that went far beyond physical fatigue. It was a weariness of the soul. The apartment was silent. Just as it had been that morning. Ryan wasn't back yet. She kicked off her shoes, feeling an instant sense of relief, and walked barefoot across the hardwood floor. She was heading to the bedroom to change when she heard his voice. He was in the home office. The door was slightly ajar. His voice was quiet, almost a whisper, but the acoustics of the long, empty hallway carried the sound directly to her. Amelia stopped, her body instantly tensing. He was on the phone. No. She doesn't suspect a thing. I know what I'm doing. A pause. Amelia held her breath, her heart hammering irregularly against her ribs. She took a step closer, pressing her body against the cool hallway wall, out of sight from the doorway. Just stay calm, Mom. I'll handle it. She won't find out about anything. That sentence hit her with the force of a punch to the gut. The air escaped her lungs in a soundless hiss. Just stay calm, Mom. He wasn't talking to a friend or a colleague. He was talking to his own mother, the woman who called Amelia her daughter, who hugged her at Sunday barbecues, who praised her pot roast. The complicity in his voice, the calm with which he promised deception, was more devastating than any shout could ever be. She froze. The blood seemed to turn to ice in her veins, and in place of panic came a sharp, razor-like clarity. There, in that dark hallway, she finally understood. There was no more room for doubt, for the quiet, desperate voice in her head that tried to find an innocent explanation. The pregnancy test wasn't lost. The phone call wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a conspiracy, a betrayal planned and covered up by the one person who, after him, should have been her greatest support. He was hiding something big, and his mother knew about it. Amelia backed away, silent as a shadow. She returned to the living room, her body moving on pure survival instinct. She sat on the sofa, clasping her hands on her lap so tightly her knuckles turned white. The adrenaline that had sustained her the day before had evaporated, leaving behind a cold, heavy void. It was no longer pain or shock. It was determination, an icy certainty that the marriage she had believed in was a farce. She no longer had to make excuses for him. The sentence she had overheard had sealed his betrayal with lead. Now, the only question that mattered was, what would she do with this truth? The image of a submissive, crying woman, a wife making a scene, was erased from her mind. That was not her. She would never be that. When Ryan emerged from the office a few minutes later, he found her sitting in the living room, staring into space. Hey, honey, I got back a little while ago. Just catching up on some work stuff, he said, the lie rolling off his tongue with terrifying naturalness. Amelia slowly turned her head and looked at him. She studied him. Her husband, a stranger, a liar. She said nothing. She just held his gaze, letting the silence stretch between them, thick and charged with tension. For the first time, she saw a flicker of discomfort in his eyes, a small crack in his confident facade. Is something wrong? He asked, his voice softer, less certain. Amelia blinked slowly. No, nothing, she replied, her voice low and controlled. I was just thinking. She stood up and went to the kitchen to prepare something to eat, leaving him bewildered in the middle of the living room. He watched her go. That night, the dynamic between them changed forever. He didn't know it yet, but he was no longer the director of this story. She had taken the helm, and she was about to set a new course, one that would lead him straight into a collision with the very thing he was trying so desperately to avoid. Amelia's war would not be fought with screams and tears, but in the silence of sleepless nights and the blue light of a computer screen. The phrase she had overheard in the hallway, "She won't find out about anything," was not just a confirmation of his betrayal. It was an insult to her intelligence. They had underestimated her. Ryan, his mother, the unknown woman, they all operated under the assumption that Amelia was a passive pawn on the chessboard of their lives, a figurehead easily deceived. That miscalculation would be their undoing. The investigation began that very night. When Ryan fell asleep, breathing the false peace of a man who believes he is in control, Amelia slipped out of bed. Her movements were fluid and silent. She was no longer a wife sharing a space with him, she was an intruder in her own home. She was a hunter. In the office, the very room where the betrayal had been sealed with a whispered phone call, she opened his laptop. The password was their wedding date. The irony was so thick, she could taste its bitterness. She didn't look for texts or emails. That would be too obvious. Ryan was meticulous. He was a salesman trained to cover his tracks. Instead, Amelia opened the door to the world he truly inhabited. A world of numbers, expenses, transactions. She started with the corporate credit card statements, a territory she had never explored out of trust and disinterest. Now, she analyzed them with a surgeon's precision. Line by line, she traced the charges. Dinners in restaurants where they had never been together, always for two. Florists in cities where he was supposedly attending business meetings. Small gifts, discreet jewelry, purchases from luxury boutiques in Copley Place that didn't fit his profile at all. They were breadcrumbs, but together, they began to form a trail. A trail that consistently led to one name, repeated on hotel bills and flight reservations. Jessica Miller. The name appeared as a companion on a hotel booking in Philadelphia from 3 months prior. That trip, he had claimed, was for a sales conference. He had called every night, his voice filled with a longing that now sounded obscene. Jessica Miller. The name was common, but in the context of these expenses, it felt like a sentence. With a name in hand, Amelia moved to the second phase of her investigation. Social media. She typed the name into the search bar, her heart pounding in her chest. Dozens of profiles appeared. She was patient. She cross-referenced cities, mutual connections, until finally, she found her. The profile picture showed a smiling brunette with vibrant eyes, around 30 years old. Standing next to her was a broad-shouldered man with a reserved smile. A wedding ring glistened on the woman's finger. Amelia felt a wave of ice-cold shock. The woman was married. The click of the mouse was the only sound in the quiet office. She opened the profile, which was public. It was a carefully curated window into a life. There were photos from vacations, dinners with friends, declarations of love for her husband. And there were photos with Ryan, discreetly placed in group shots from company retreats. Jessica Miller was a sales representative, a colleague, a travel companion, the missing piece of the puzzle. She scrolled through the page, absorbing every detail. She saw photos of Jessica with her son, a boy who looked to be about 5 years old. In dozens of pictures, the wedding ring was on her hand. This woman wasn't just having an affair with her husband. She was betraying her own family. The pregnancy, the test in the glove compartment, the baby on the way. It would be the fruit of a double betrayal, a secret that would destroy 2 families. And then Amelia's gaze fell on the man in the photos. The husband. His profile was tagged in several posts, Michael Miller. Unlike Jessica's open and radiant profile, Michael's was restrained. Almost Spartan. Few photos, mostly of him with his wife and son, or in running gear from a local race. His bio contained only 3 words, father, husband, police officer. That information hit her with unexpected force. A police officer. Not a director, a lawyer, or a businessman. A man trained to handle conflict, to enforce order, to react under pressure. A man whose profession was defined by a code of honor and discipline. A man who was highly unlikely to react to betrayal with indifference. Amelia leaned back in the chair, her brain processing the new variable. The mistress's husband was real. He had a face, a name, a profession, and a normal life that was about to explode. She looked at Michael's picture, at his serious face, at the way he held his son on his shoulders. There was a certain solidity to him, a presence that contrasted sharply with Ryan's polished, slippery image. In that moment, a plan began to form in her mind. It wasn't a thoughtless act of revenge born of anger. It was something colder, more strategic. Confronting Ryan would be pointless. He would deny everything, manipulate her, make her out to be the bad wife. Tears and desperation would give him power. But the truth was a weapon, and a weapon is only effective when used at the right time against the right target. She didn't want to destroy Ryan with her own hands. She wanted something deeper. She wanted him to be unmasked by the web of lies he himself had built. She wanted his mask to fall not because of her actions, but as a consequence of his own choices. And Michael Miller, the betrayed husband, the police officer, was the key. He was the external force that could detonate this house of cards. Amelia closed the laptop. The finality of the click was absolute. The trembling in her hands had stopped completely. The coldness she had felt for days now had a purpose and a direction. She was no longer a victim in this story. She had become the architect of its conclusion. The days following this discovery were a monumental exercise in self-control for Amelia. She moved through their marital routine like an actress playing her most challenging role. She smiled at the right moments, asked the expected questions about Ryan's day at work, and maintained a facade of normalcy with a perfection that frightened her. Inside, however, she was a well of ice and calculation. Every one of his smiles, every casual touch, every lie dressed up as daily conversation was catalogued in her mind, no longer as a wound, but as fuel for the determination crystallizing within her. She said nothing to her husband. The impulse to confront him, to scream the truth in his face and watch his good guy mask shatter, was a constant temptation, a scream trapped in her throat. But she suppressed it. An argument would only bring momentary relief. An explosion of pain would allow him to defend himself, to twist the narrative, perhaps even to shift the blame onto her. The truth she possessed was pure, undeniable, and it would not be contaminated by the venom of his denials. Amelia's plan matured in the silence of sleepless nights while Ryan slept soundly beside her. The strategy was not about destruction, but about exposure. The truth didn't need her voice to be heard. It just needed the right stage and the right audience. And that audience, she had decided, would not be her alone. The decisive move was executed with the cold precision of a military operation. One afternoon, while Ryan was in a long board meeting, Amelia went down to the garage. The Audi was in its spot, a silent monument to betrayal. With steady hands sheathed in latex gloves from her clinic, she opened the glove compartment. The pregnancy test was still there, tossed in a corner, a small piece of plastic weighted with the gravity of a double life. She took it out, placed it against the neutral backdrop of the passenger seat, and photographed it with her phone. The image was sharp, clinical, and irrefutable. The two blue lines stood out like a confession. Back in the apartment, she sat at her laptop, her safe harbor in enemy territory. She opened the folders where she had meticulously saved every piece of evidence. Screenshots of hotel reservations in Ryan's name with Jessica listed as a companion. Credit card statements showing dinners for two in distant cities. The chronology of the affair was laid out in dates, locations, and dollar amounts. She selected the most damning documents, proof that left no room for interpretation. With the digital dossier ready, only one step remained, finding Michael's contact information. It wasn't difficult. Through a deeper web search, combining his name with his profession, she found a phone number listed for a small security company he ran on the side. It was a calculated risk. She created an anonymous email address, a disposable account with no ties to her identity. To this man, she would not be Amelia Hayes, the betrayed wife. She would simply be a source of information. The message was short, direct, and completely devoid of emotion. She attached the photo of the pregnancy test and the screenshots of the reservations. In the body of the email, she wrote a single, carefully constructed sentence designed to strike at the core. A man's dignity is being stolen without his knowledge. You deserve to know the truth about your own life before others do. She hit send. The click of the mouse echoed in the empty apartment. For a long moment, she stared at the screen, her heart pounding like a hammer. The arrow had been loosed. Now, all that was left was to wait for the impact. The response came quickly. Less than an hour later, a notification popped up on her screen. Amelia's hand trembled slightly as she opened the message. Michael's reply was even shorter than her email. "We need to talk. In person." Amelia felt a shiver. His reaction wasn't denial or blind fury. It was pragmatic. He wanted to verify the source, to understand the scale of the damage. It was the response of a cop, someone trained to assess a crime scene before taking action. She wrote back, agreeing, and they exchanged a few messages to arrange a meeting in a neutral, public place. They chose a discreet coffee shop in the Seaport district, far from the places they usually frequented. 2 days later, they met face to face. Michael Miller looked exactly as he did in the photos, a solidly built man with an intense gaze that seemed to see through superficialities. He wasted no time on pleasantries. He sat down, ordered a black coffee, and got straight to the point. "The evidence you sent me. Is it real?" "Every bit of it," Amelia replied, her voice firm. "The pregnancy test was in my husband's car. The reservations are from his credit card statements." Michael listened in silence, his jaw tight. He showed no sign of the pain he must have been feeling, only a suppressed rage, a dangerous energy. He looked at the printouts she had brought, his finger tracing over the name of his wife, Jessica. "They're playing us for fools," he said, his voice low and rough. "Living their own lives, making plans, and treating us like background scenery." In that moment, Amelia no longer saw him as a stranger, but as an ally, a fellow sufferer forged in the same fire of betrayal. "I don't want a scandal for myself," she stated clearly. "I just want to walk away from this with my head held high." "But he can't just get away with it. Not after all this." Michael looked up and met her gaze directly. For the first time, Amelia saw the pain hidden beneath the anger, but she also saw something else. Unyielding determination. Get away with it? He repeated with a grim smile. No, this isn't going to end with an apology. I want everyone to know. His family, your family. I want him to have nowhere to hide. I'm going to blow this affair up in front of everyone. The intensity in his voice was both terrifying and cleansing. He didn't just want justice. He wanted a public execution. He wanted the humiliation he felt to be visited upon those who had caused it, on a public stage where the shame could not be denied or hidden. Amelia thought of the upcoming Sunday barbecue at her parents' house, a weekly sanctity. Her entire family would be there, her traditional parents, uncles, aunts, cousins. And Ryan would be there, at the center of it all, playing the role of the perfect son-in-law. It was the perfect stage, the perfect audience. She took a deep breath, and the decision in her mind hardened like steel. I'm in. That Sunday in Boston greeted them with a pale blue, almost white sky and a crisp air that nipped at the skin, typical of early spring. For most people, it was a day of rest, family, and peace. For Amelia, it was Judgment Day. Every passing second brought her closer to the detonation. She moved through the morning with an outward calm that was a stark contrast to the storm raging in her chest. What she felt wasn't stress or fear, but a sense of heavy inevitability, as if she were about to witness a natural disaster she herself had set in motion. Her parents' house in Wellesley was the epicenter of the Hayes family life. It was a large property with a manicured lawn and a back patio where a massive gas grill reigned supreme. It was the stage for all family celebrations, a safe harbor of tradition. On Sundays, the place filled with loud conversations, laughter, and the unmistakable smell of grilled meat. Today, for Amelia, that smell was associated with sacrifice. They arrived around noon. Ryan drove the Audi, and soft music filled the silence that had grown between them in recent days. He seemed either not to notice or to ignore his wife's growing distance. When he parked on the street in front of the house, he turned to her with his usual smile. A smile that now seemed grotesque, like a poorly glued-on mask. Ready for Uncle John to ask again when we're finally going to give him a grandchild? Ryan joked, trying to create a bond that no longer existed. Amelia looked at him, her expression blank. Let's go inside, she said curtly. As they passed through the gate, they were immediately enveloped in a loud, warm welcome. Amelia's mother, Christine, kissed her on the cheek, her eyes filled with perpetual maternal concern. Her father, Richard, a man of few words but generous in his gestures, clapped Ryan firmly on the back, laughing at some joke he had already told. Uncles, aunts, cousins, everyone was there, and without exception, they all adored Ryan. He was the dream catch, a man of success, a charming guy who had won the heart of the family's eldest, most reserved daughter. Ryan thrived in this environment. He moved around the grill with the ease of a politician on the campaign trail, a beer in hand, an easy smile, and a joke always on the tip of his tongue. He was the center of attention, the unofficial master of ceremonies of this Sunday ritual. Amelia watched him from a distance, sitting on a lounge chair in a corner of the yard. She saw him charming her mother, listening with feigned attention to her father's fishing stories, playing with her younger cousins. He was playing the role of the perfect husband with nauseating perfection. Every smile, every public gesture of affection, was like a stab wound. Amelia exchanged a short, discreet text with Michael. We're here. The reply came instantly. On my way. 30 p.m. She glanced at her watch. 20 minutes left. 20 minutes until the end of the world as she knew it. A small, terrified part of her soul wanted to scream for him not to come, to call off the mission. But the dominant part, forged in the ice of betrayal and lies, remained unmoved. There was no turning back. Lunch was served. The long oak table groaned under the weight of bowls of potato salad, coleslaw, bread, and of course, the steaks her father served with undisguised pride. Everyone sat down, and the conversations flowed freely. Ryan took the seat next to Amelia, placing a hand on her thigh under the table, a possessive gesture that sent a shiver of disgust through her. He leaned in and whispered in her ear. You look beautiful today, so quiet. She didn't respond. She just picked up her silverware. The food on her plate looked like sawdust. She could feel her family's eyes on her. An aunt asked if everything was okay. A cousin remarked that she looked pale. She answered in monosyllables, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Time dragged on mercilessly. Every chew, every sip of sparkling water seemed to last an eternity. The watch on her wrist read 1:28 p.m. And then they heard it. The sound of the gate bell. A sharp ring cut through the cacophony of conversation and laughter, forcing a brief silence. Everyone looked at each other. No one was expecting more guests. Who could that be? Amelia's mother wondered, getting up to open the gate. Amelia felt the blood drain from her face. Her heart began to beat in an uncontrolled rhythm, thudding dully in her ears. Ryan looked at her, a frown of confusion on his forehead. "Did you invite someone, honey?" She just shook her head. No. Her gaze was fixed on the gate, visible from the yard. Her mother opened it. There he stood. Michael Miller. He wasn't in uniform, but his posture unequivocally indicated a man on a mission. He wore jeans and a dark polo shirt. But the stiffness of his shoulders and the expression on his face left no doubt as to the purpose of his visit. He exchanged a few words with Amelia's mother, who looked bewildered, then walked past her and strode toward the patio with a firm, determined gait. The silence, which had previously lasted only a fraction of a second, now became absolute. Conversations died. Forks stopped midway to mouths. All eyes turned to the stranger who had violated the sanctity of Sunday lunch. Michael didn't look at anyone else. His gaze was locked on one point, Ryan. Ryan, holding a piece of steak on his fork, froze completely. The color drained from his face. He recognized Michael. The easygoing smile vanished, replaced by a mask of pure panic and disbelief. His eyes darted from Michael to Amelia, and understanding dawned in them like a slow-motion lightning strike. Michael stopped at the table, just a few feet from Ryan. His presence was an anomaly, a dark, destructive force in the scenery of family joy. With a slow, calculated motion, he pulled folded papers and a small plastic object from his back pocket. He placed them on the table next to a bowl of salad with a dull thud that echoed in the deathly silence. The pregnancy test and the printouts of the hotel reservations. The eyes of everyone at the table widened, staring at the objects. Amelia's father stood up, his face contorted in a mask of confusion and anger. "What the hell is this? Who are you?" Michael ignored the question. He never took his eyes off Ryan, who was now ashen. His mouth was open, but no sound came out. And then Michael spoke. His voice was not a shout, but it was loud, clear, and carried the weight of a final judgment. Every word was like a hammer blow shattering the glass of this family farce. "Your son-in-law got my wife pregnant." Absolute silence. A silence so profound that Amelia could hear the rush of her own blood. The frozen gazes of her family moved from Michael to Ryan, and then to her. It was a ballet of shock and horror. Her mother's jaw dropped, her hand flying to her mouth. Her father looked as if he had aged 10 years in 10 seconds. The uncles and cousins were paralyzed, their expressions ranging from disbelief to disgust. Ryan turned even paler. He tried to speak, but no sound emerged. He looked like a fish out of water, gasping for air that had just been stolen from him. The facade he had so carefully constructed over the years crumbled with a single sentence. He was stripped bare, exposed, and humiliated in front of the very clan whose approval he had worked so hard to win. The family was in absolute shock. The shame was palpable, a toxic fog spreading over the table. This was the moment, the climax of Amelia's opera, and she, the protagonist, finally made her move. In the epicenter of that stunning silence, where every second stretched to the breaking point, Amelia became the only thing in motion. All around her was chaos, the shocked stares of her family, Ryan's deathly pallor, Michael's granite silhouette, but within her, a deep, crystalline calm finally settled. It was the peace that comes only after the storm, when everything that was meant to break lies in pieces on the ground. She stood up. The movement was neither abrupt nor uncertain. It was fluid and deliberate, as if she were stretching after a long sleep. She casually ran a hand through her hair, tucking back a strand that wasn't out of place. It was a display of normalcy amidst the absurd, a sign that for her, this was not an end, but a new beginning. She took a deep breath, letting the air fill her lungs, and the quiet sound was the only thing that broke the tense silence. Everyone stared at her, waiting for the explosion, the tears, the confrontation, waiting for the script they knew from movies. But Amelia did not offer them the drama they craved. Her gaze swept over Ryan, not with hatred, but with a cutting indifference, as if looking at a complete stranger on the street. Then she turned to Michael, giving him an almost imperceptible nod, a confirmation of a mission accomplished. Only then did she speak. Her voice was clear, without a hint of a tremor, so that everyone at the table could hear every word. "Thank you. I have no intention of wasting another day on someone who doesn't know the meaning of the word loyalty." The sentence hung in the air, simple, final, and lethal. It wasn't an accusation, it was a statement of fact, a farewell. Without screaming, without crying, without engaging in pathetic explanations, Amelia simply turned on her heel. She grabbed her purse from the chair beside her, took out her car keys, and walked away from the table. Her steps on the stone patio tiles were firm and rhythmic. Each click of her heel was a declaration of her reclaimed freedom. She disappeared from their sight, crossed the threshold of the front door, and vanished like a dream, beautiful in her resolve, icily cool in her dignity. Her exit was like pulling the pin from a grenade. The silence immediately shattered into a million pieces. The gathering, or what was left of it, was now a public spectacle, and Ryan was at its center. Snapped out of his stupor, he tried to stand, stammering his wife's name. Amelia, wait, I can explain this. But her father, Richard, whose disappointment had seamlessly morphed into icy fury, slammed his fist on the table with such force that the platters jumped. What are you going to explain? His voice was a low growl. Are you going to explain how you turned my home into a circus? How you disgraced my daughter to my face? At that moment, Ryan's phone, forgotten on the table, began to vibrate wildly. The name Jessica lit up the screen, like a second bomb exploding moments after the first. He stared at the device with pure terror, as if it were a venomous snake. The insistent ringing was a cry of desperation from across the city. It was his mistress, surely informed by Michael that their secret world had just spectacularly collapsed. Aware that Jessica's husband had left her to deal with the mess, Ryan felt cornered. On one side, he was being crushed by his father-in-law's contemptuous glare. On the other, he was being called by the desperate woman who had pulled him into this abyss. He didn't answer. The phone finally went silent, leaving a thick echo of panic in the air. Michael Miller, his work done, calmly collected his documents from the table. He looked at Ryan, not with anger anymore, but with a kind of grim pity. Now she's your problem, Michael said sharply. And get ready for her to do to you exactly what she did to me. With those words, he turned and walked away, leaving a scene of precisely calculated wrath. Ryan collapsed back into his chair, burying his face in his hands. His fingers knotted in his hair as if he feared his skull might crack. He was utterly alone, a castaway on an island of accusatory stares. His mother-in-law, Christine, who had adored him just an hour before, now looked at him with a mixture of profound shame and pure fury. You ruined everything, Ryan, she hissed, her voice low but dripping with venom. You had it all. A wonderful woman, a family that loved you. And for what? For some cheap affair, you threw your whole life in the trash. Her words hit their mark. He looked at the empty chair where Amelia had been sitting. In that single, shattering moment, the brutal truth hit him like a ton of bricks. He realized the monumental, idiotic folly of his actions. He didn't love Jessica. She was an escape, a cheap thrill, a selfish impulse. He had never considered the real consequences. He loved the life he had built with Amelia, the comfort, the status, the admiration of everyone around him. And now, in a pathetic chase for something more, he had lost absolutely everything. He was ruined, a deposed king in a kingdom of grilled steak and shame. At the same time, miles away, Amelia was driving through the streets of Boston with no particular destination. The car windows were halfway down, and the cool wind whipped against her face, but she didn't feel it. She hadn't shed a single tear. All that remained inside her was a vast, boundless emptiness, the void left by a marriage that had once existed. But it was not an emptiness of loss. It was an emptiness of possibility. It was a vast, cleared terrain, perfectly prepared for new construction. She didn't know where she was going yet, but for the first time in a long time, she knew one thing for sure. She was in complete control of her own destiny. The road ahead was open, and she was, at last, free.